Thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. And then there were three. Chicago is one step closer to a new police superintendent.
This process has been very inclusive. This process has been very transparent, and it's been very democratic.
The new Community Police Commission selects three finalists for the top cop job. Now it's up to Mayor Johnson to choose among them.
Every time we make a little bit of progress, it seems to rain again and fill it back up.
Chicago cleans up from another round of flooding and severe weather. How much more can the area's stormwater infrastructure take? Lawyers for Mike Madigan seek to suppress key evidence in his upcoming federal trial. And in sports, the shocking firing of longtime Northwestern University football coach Pat Fitzgerald after hazing allegations rocks the Evanston campus. There is a lot to get to this week, and now joining us are Rick Tellender of the Chicago Sun-Times, our very own Heather Sharon of WTTW News, Monica Eng of Axios, and Greg Pratt with the Chicago Tribune. So let's get right into it. Greg Pratt, tell us about Sean Barnes, Angel Novales, and Larry Snelling, the three finalists for the superintendent job.
Well, you've got two homegrown local Chicago guys who have been here a long time, and somebody who had a cup of coffee at COPA, the Police Accountability Agency. And what Superintendent Brown, the predecessor, did, the criticism of him was that he's an outsider and he doesn't understand the culture. And you can see.
You're talking about Barnes?
No, I'm talking about Superintendent Brown, the predecessor.
Superintendent, right. But
and
Barnes was the one that had worked for COPA.
That's right. But the idea is that they want somebody who knows Chicago, who's an insider, because Superintendent Brown helped wreck morale. And
so, Heather Sharon, would that make you believe that Angel Novales and Larry Snelling have the upper hand here with Mayor Johnson?
Well, he said during the campaign that if he could choose, he would choose somebody who would come up through the ranks, and both Angel Novales and Larry Snelling fit that bill. The issue that Brandon Johnson is going to confront, as has confronted the last three Chicago mayors, is that the Chicago Police Department is under a federal court order to reform. It is less than 5% compliant with that order, and it's not clear that an insider could change the path of the department, which has been beset by scandal after scandal after scandal. So typically, the path has been, well, let's bring in an outsider, but David Brown was very unpopular. Could Sean Barnes sort of bring everybody on board? That is the decision that is facing the mayor.
So what about that, Monica Eng? Could City Council hold up confirmation of a new superintendent if indeed Mayor Johnson goes with an insider?
Well, I mean, that remains to be seen. He could just reject all three of them too, and he could say to the CCPSA, "Hey, I don't like it." But that would seem a little odd, seeing as he was on board with the community being a lot more involved in choosing this. And but I think a sort of bigger question is, you're right, Heather. If the CPD has had so many problems for so many years, how is it that insiders are going to fix something that's been endemic in the system for so long?
But you talk to a lot of older people that echo the same thing, that they want an insider. They want someone that knows this department. So how's that going to break down? Insider versus someone that maybe was around to bury some of the bodies there?
Well, Snelling is very popular. Snelling is popular with the Black Caucus. He's popular with conservative aldermen. I think Novales has a lot of respect. I would really love to see, and I mean this with no diss to Barnes, I would love to hear the explanation for how you go from a town with 6 murders in a year to leading the Chicago
Madison,
Police,
Wisconsin.
To leading the Chicago Police Department. I bet he has a hell of a pitch about that, but it's still a really hard sell.
Rick Tellender, what do you think? Insider versus outsider here to lead the department?
That's a really tough thing. I've been hanging around with a couple, with some police, going around with them. It's almost an impossible job right now. The first thing that happens is everybody pulls a cell phone out if there's anything going on. And you can't, the consent decree, I mean, they have to change. But if you get a guy from the outside or a woman from the outside, there's nothing like Chicago. But if you get somebody from the inside, then you might have somebody who can't change the people around him. I've looked at a statistic. London has way over three times the amount of population of Chicago. Chicago had almost 700 murders last year. London should have had 2,300 by rights. They had 109 last year. So, I mean, you'd get somebody from Madison or even from Dallas, where Superintendent Brown came from. This is a different beast here in Chicago.
Well, I would say the UK, there's much stricter gun laws as well.
Right.
So it's it's much harder for people to get their hands on firearms. Heather Sharon, this process got a ringing endorsement from an unlikely source, the president of the FOP, who said it's the first time that someone asked us what we thought.
True, although John Catanzara, the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, just a week or so ago told me that the process was hopelessly compromised because he didn't believe that the CCPSA would nominate a white man to lead the department. There was a lot of controversy over why Brian McDermott wasn't one of the 6 semifinalists. Wasn't one of the 3 finalists, obviously. So John Catanzara is going to John Catanzara, and whether that means that this sort of process will have legitimacy in the public, I think, is really yet to be seen.
All right, so does anyone want to handicap who they think is going to get the nod from Mayor Johnson?
Snelling seems to have the upper hand, but I mean, as Rick said, who would want this job? You are blamed for everything. It is so high profile. You've got the
dozens applied, so clearly dozens
52,
did.
Yeah, but it's such a high profile place to fail with so many different factors working against you.
Greg Pratt, Monica brought this up. Is there any chance Brandon Johnson would look at these 3 and say, I don't want any of you, start the process over again?
I would go on a limb and say no. I don't think so. I think that the process was pretty well respected. The candidates are considered serious people. The head of the commission is a SEIU guy who he has a lot of respect for, and I just don't see that playing out.
And
here.
he has made comments to the point of wanting to respect this process. It's a new process. It just got put into place this year. It's kind of like they're building the plane while they're flying here. The CCPSA, as you mentioned, Heather, that's the Community Commission on Police. Safety and accountability. Just so the viewers at home know,
Yes.
I couldn't even remember it myself.
All right. It's a 7-person board that was nominated by the Police District Council.
Actually, these people were nominated by Lori Lightfoot. They're an interim commission.
They're the interim.
So once the elected district councils get set, they will nominate 7 people who have to be confirmed by the mayor and the city council. It is very complicated.
Very complicated. Heather Sharon, you brought up Mayor Lightfoot, who just got dinged by the Inspector General with an ethics violation stemming from a story you broke about her campaign sending emails to CPS staff asking for student volunteers. So what's the IG alleging here?
Well, these are actually a second set of emails that Lori Lightfoot is now in trouble for. These emails were sent from her campaign soliciting donations, and they were the same emails that went out to everybody who had signed up for updates from her campaign. The problem is that they also went to city employees at their cityofchicago.org email addresses, and Inspector General Deborah Witzberg said that was inappropriate because it essentially solicited money from people who reported to Lori Lightfoot. She also dinged the mayor for using her formal city title in those emails. So she said, I'm Mayor Lori Lightfoot running for re-election, please support me. And that, she said, is an inappropriate use of city property. The former mayor, I should say, could face fines of up to $60,000 if the ethics board goes to the maximum for each of the 3 violations.
And ethics fines used to be pretty rare, although they've become a little more regular. So would you imagine that they would levy a pretty hefty fine on her?
That's a great question. I would imagine that they take it relatively easy on her. Although there's I don't think that they're going to do 60,000, but who knows? But the issue she has, the issue that Mayor Lightfoot has, is that they had told her stop doing this about 10 months beforehand. And so they're coming out in their statement and their defense is this happens, this is incidental, and we tried our best to do this good faith fixing, but your best wasn't good enough, and there's questions about how much was your best. So I think that the ethics board is historically a pretty nice body, very polite. So 60,000 seems out of the question for me, but they might want to make an example.
All right, would they want to make an example, Heather, out of 45th Ward Alderman James Gardner, who the IG slapped with another ethics violation or allegations of ethics violations as well? First of all, explain those to us.
Well, this dates back several years to 2019 when Alderman Jim Gardner, relatively recently elected to the city council, apparently concocted a plan with 2 of his employees to ticket a man who was a frequent Facebook critic of his. Now, this man has not a typical front yard, but a rain garden in his front yard, so he got slapped with nearly $600 in fines, even though those plants are allowed under city code. Now, the man, Pete Kaczynska, he fought the fines.
I've talked to him before.
Yes, he fought the fines.
He is a critic. He is
yes,
definitely a critic of the alderman.
So he fought the fines. He got the fines tossed out and then filed a complaint with the Inspector General, which led to today's finding. I reached out to Alderman Gardner. He didn't get back to me.
Alderman Gardner seems to be caught up in this kind of old school style alleged bullying and kind of tit for tat kind of behavior. So what's the ethics board going to do here with him?
I think that they're going to fine him. You know, I think that and it'll be interesting if they try to make an example out of him and give him the maximum, because he has a list of offenses and issues and controversies as long as my arm, and so. And probably as long as, you know, some of the longer arms here, like Rick's arm, you know. But
well, it's been reported by you, by us, that he's been under federal probe as well for some of his official action.
Yeah. Well, the feds don't tell you when they start investigating, and they don't usually tell you when they stop investigating, which is very frustrating.
All right, it's been frustrating for migrants and for protesters and supporters of the migrants. What do we know about the investigations into what happened where a cop or cops allegedly had sex with migrants, perhaps underage migrants?
We don't know much, but I believe the mayor came out and said, well, Copa said that they are investigating sexual misconduct. You know, some of the things that have been in the press go well beyond that reporting. I don't think we've seen that established. The mayor said that they've definitely moved them out of that precinct. That suggests that was unsafe. But, you know, Catanzaro said nothing's been proven. These are allegations. So, you know, I think we have to be careful with our language, but we do know that they've been moved out and that COPA's investigating.
All right, well, let's hear from some of those local organizations that demanded that migrants be moved from police stations.
We will hold these individuals to the extent of the law. They are not above the law. And we are making sure that these migrants, these asylum seekers, have a voice.
Heather, is it unusual that we wouldn't know the identities of suspects here in this case at this point, or anything else about what's going on? I mean, it's been just so kind of tight-lipped.
No. Police misconduct investigations by city law are confidential, and so there is not much that city officials are allowed to tell us. That has proved very frustrating for the people who feel like these new arrivals in Chicago, here legally seeking asylum, are really at risk, or at least were at risk. And I think that that is going to be one of the big challenges facing the mayor, balancing this need for transparency and accountability with the obligation he has to protect the rights of the officers who've been accused.
Well, you know, we really do need, they should be moving expeditiously on this, you know, because of, it's just a bad thing to have lingering, and they should be working on that quickly for the migrants, for the officers, for the city, because, you know, this is a problem. And, you know, I can't tell you, every day I get complaints from a variety of quarters about what's going on, and people have a right to know, and we really need to get to the bottom of this.
Rick Tellender, are you aware of like what the mayor's plan is here to move the remainder of migrants from police stations and adequately house folks as they're on waiting for asylum here?
No, you know, I'm just like a regular citizen kind of following this, and I know it's an issue, it's a problem, because everybody says do the right thing, but don't do it near me, don't do it in my neighborhood, don't do it in my school, don't do it whatever. We don't have facilities built for this. I mean, they just, if I understand it correctly, a lot of these are Venezuelans sent up from Texas, right? Mm-hmm. Courtesy of Governor Abbott. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, so there was no way to be prepared. And I just think getting public attention on it can help solve it, figure out somebody's got to do the humanitarian thing.
All right, let's move on to some other legal issues this week. Heather Sharon, not surprisingly, the defense in the case of Mike Madigan want to quash or not admit certain wiretap recordings as evidence in his upcoming federal trial. Why don't they want these tapes to be played? Governor Blagojevich said play all the tapes.
Well, Mike Madigan says, look, don't play the tapes. They weren't obtained properly. I didn't do anything wrong. You didn't have probable cause to get the warrant, to get the wiretaps in the first place. But even if you hear the wiretaps, I didn't do anything wrong. And that is a very similar argument that Alderman Ed Burke, former Alderman Ed Burke, made in his case. He tried to toss out all of the wiretaps. The judge in his case was not at all sympathetic. So this is just sort of part of the process that has to work its way out as we prepare for Mike Madigan to go on trial in April of 2024.
Is that April of 2024 date really going to hold? I mean, we see a lot of folks with a lot of power trying to push off their various federal trials. What are the next steps here?
Well, the federal prosecutors don't seem to be taking this motion that seriously. But yeah, Mike Madigan says, you know, this doesn't really prove that I did any favors, there was any pay for play. But they have until late August to respond to this motion. And from their initial response, it doesn't sound like it's going to go anywhere.
All right, well, we have to move on and talk about just a bombshell story this week that we've been talking about all week out of Northwestern. So the latest today, Rick, is the baseball coach now has been fired, Jim Foster, over bullying accusations. So take us inside the allegations surrounding his program.
Yeah, that one just came out of nowhere. This football thing started, and all of a sudden, the baseball, story about him being abusive and other things that he did. I mean, I'd never even heard of the guy because he was only there one season. And the team went 10-40, I believe, and 4-20 in Big Ten play. Don't forget, Pat Fitzgerald went 1-11, and 1-8 2 years in a row in the Big Ten. So losing may have been the spark for a lot of these things. Maybe that's why they don't like that guy. But it's a snowballing crazy thing. I don't know how far it's going to go.
You followed Wildcat athletics for a long time, Rick. Have you ever seen a darker time in the history of athletics over there?
Well, I would like to go back to like the mid-90s. There was a gambling scandal in both football and basketball. People may have forgotten, not just gambling, but point shaving, which is hard to believe, but you can go back and look at it. And it's a kid, well, I'm not even going to mention their names because it was so long ago, but they were basically expunged from the Northwestern record books in football and basketball. Still the only school ever in the history of the NCAA to get probation or be found guilty of gambling in 2 sports in 1 season, 1 year. So that wasn't good.
And so Pat Fitzgerald now, who's been fired, Heather, he's lawyered up with probably one of the most high-powered attorneys in town, Dan Webb. Would you anticipate that Fitzgerald is going to try and get much of the money that he's owed, and Dan Webb might be successful at getting him that?
Well, you don't hire Dan Webb if you don't want to go scorched earth. That is not what Dan Webb is about. Of course, he was a former U.S. attorney. He represented Fox News in the recently concluded Dominion Law case. He was involved in investigating Kim Fox's office with the Jussie Smollett case. So it's clear he feels like he was mistreated by the Northwestern administration, and he says he is out to reclaim his good name.
And then on the other side, the person that actually did this investigation, ordered up by the university, Maggie Hickey, who seems to do every high-profile investigation in Chicago and Illinois. Where does she find time to do that? Or is it her law firm?
Well, that's a good question, especially considering that the consent decree is now nearly 4.5 years old, and as I said before, very little.
It's still a full-time
of,
job
yes.
to make sure the police are complying with that.
Well, right before I got here, I was actually teaching a Northwestern class of journalism students, and if one good thing came out of this, they said that they were at a college journalism conference, and everybody was high-fiving them. They said, Northwestern Daily, oh my gosh, you guys are heroes. And so
certainly they've had their time in the sun for keeping this. And it does seem very clear that Northwestern's top brass wanted to bury this. The way they released all this on a late Friday afternoon, they did a 2-week suspension. They said, all right, our hands are washed of this, and the reporters kept on it.
Yeah, people dump on young journalists sometimes, but our hats should all go off to those kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things it shows is that mainstream journalism, newspapers don't have enough people to have on the Northwestern beat.
Right.
You got to rely on student newspapers. When I was covering college football and sports for Sports Illustrated, I would always go to the student office, wherever it was, Miami, Oklahoma, Southern Cal, any of those places. Those kids know. Those are their classmates.
And you've mentioned this before. They're talking to the members of the football team. Their friends are friends with people on the football team, so they have the sources. Does Pat Fitzgerald have a case here in that the Hickey report did conclude that there wasn't sufficient evidence to say that he knew what was happening? He has reiterated that his position is he didn't know what was happening. So then Northwestern allegedly breached their contract with him by firing him.
Well, it's a legal mess, but my gut feeling is nobody who's a coach like him who oversees everything could not know. I mean, you have to know, and if you don't know, it's because you don't want to know. And he didn't tell people to do these things, I don't believe, but if you don't know what goes on in your locker room, then you're not in control. There's always an assistant coach, a trainer, an equipment guy. There's people around knowing what's going on. This is orchestrated. Guys wearing masks, 10 of them at a time.
But it's like these head coaches go and say, the buck stops with me, this is my program, I'm in charge here. You can't have it both ways.
That's right.
Are there other shoes to drop, you think?
athletic director? I mean, if you're losing your baseball coach and tons of your baseball team has decided they want to transfer, you're losing your baseball staff and your football coach in the same week. Where's the athletic director?
What I want to know is what is not sufficient evidence? It doesn't mean no evidence.
Right.
What is sufficient? To what standard? To reasonable doubt? To preponderance of the evidence? So it's
It would be great to see that whole report, so we can
As
see
the
what
Daily Northwestern has called for it to be fully released.
And
No doubt.
alumni
Yes.
as well have called for it.
You know, there could be, some people have asked, why aren't there criminal charges if this was sexual assault or whatever it
Well,
might
apparently
be?
there might be civil charges here,
Well,
civil
sure.
cases.
I mean, this thing isn't done. And the real problem, if you go back ways, Morty Shapiro was the president, was doing pretty well. He left 2 years ago. The athletic director, Jim
Phillips.
Jim Phillips left. These people have not been there very long. There was a new president, Rebecca Blank, was coming in. She got cancer and died so quickly. They got a new president. He's been there 10 months. I'm sure he's saying, I have no idea what's going on. Michael Schill is like, what? Wait a minute, I just got here.
Well, and then also begs the question, and I asked you this before the show, what if Schill had decided to put a harsher suspension on Fitzgerald initially, like he's going to miss part of the season or all of the season? Might they have been able to keep him?
Everybody has their opinion, but I think once it was out there, once the
Right.
thing's out, it's so egregious that it's over.
And we haven't even really talked about the allegations of racism in the programs themselves and the treatment that Black players and Latino players say they suffered at the hands of not only their teammates but the coaches, which is why it appears to me to have very significant systemic questions about what is happening at Northwestern. And I say this as an alumna who, really wants to be able to be proud of my alma mater, and I think everybody affiliated with Northwestern wants that, but there are very serious questions that need to be answered.
A lot of alumni asking questions, both of you here. And Monica, you're on campus. What's the tenor on campus right now?
Well, the students are talking to me. They said that this is kind of embarrassing for them. They're proud of their journalism fellow classmates, but they said that they'd love to get to the bottom of this. They felt like, again, that Friday 2 week, okay, just leave for 2 weeks, not even during the season, which is not enough. And they said that the student that they know of students who said that student was like, what, 2 weeks off season? I'm talking to my fellow
To the reporters.
student reps, yeah.
Right. We should move on and talk about Reverend Jesse Jackson, civil rights icon, announcing today that he's going to retire as head of Rainbow Push, the organization that he founded. So what is next for that organization?
Rainbow Push is having a bunch of weekend events. In fact, there's one right now kind of bringing together the people who were in the 88 for Jesse campaign.
This is when he ran for president.
Right. And this Sunday, the family, Rainbow Push, is expected to name a successor.
What do you think is going to happen to the organization? I mean, he is pretty much synonymous with it.
It's a really good question. I mean, he is the face.
He is,
of,
right,
yeah.
he is that organization. Who wants to kind of take a stab at the weather here and whether or not our stormwater infrastructure is going to hold up if we get another round of rain, as we're expected to get, any minute now?
This whole climate thing sucks. I think that's my most controversial statement.
That.
Where it doesn't rain for feels like months, and now it's
Drought
raining.
and now flood.
Well, how about Phoenix, Arizona?
Yeah.
They're over 110 for 2 weeks straight?
Listen, we've only been warned about climate change for at least 50 years. I remember the first Earth Day. It's like, an inconvenient truth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry, we've been told this is going to happen, right? Extreme weather events, heat, oceans rising, all that stuff. So I can't believe we're like, oh my God, can you believe it's happening? Well, yeah, duh. We did it. I mean, humans did this.
It's really hard to wrap your head around the fact that there were 11 tornadoes that touched down just the other day. In July, that is something that we're more accustomed to seeing in the spring.
Right.
And, growing up in Chicago, you were always told, well, tornadoes aren't going to come close to the water, so we don't have to worry about tornadoes. We saw a tornado and a Derico hit Rogers Park just a few years ago, and there have been other severe storms.
Well, in this line, there was apparently a reported water spout in Lake Michigan.
So the question that the city, and I'm sure that other officials are facing, is can the city's infrastructure withstand this extreme weather
And
fueled
we had an
by
engineer
climate
from the
change?
Metropolitan Water Reclamation District on this week who said no. I mean, it looks like the billions of dollars that have been invested into the reservoirs and the deep tunnels, they're going to need billions more to contend with the storms that are here and likely to be here in the future.
Well, there were 9 inches of rain in Cicero that last storm. I mean, nobody can handle 9. I mean, no system. that fast, 9
And they
inches
talk
of rain.
about a very old stormwater system in Cicero, too, an old
Yeah.
sewer system that's just not working properly.
Well, and you're going to see parts of the city and parts of the county that are less resourced suffer the most. Cicero has had crumbling infrastructure for decades and been sounding the alarm. You're just, like you said, not going to be able to withstand that, and the people who are going to suffer are the poorest and the most vulnerable, and that's something that officials are going to have to grapple with.
All right, well, I'm grappling with the fact that this half an hour has gone by very fast, but we are out of time, so our thanks to Rick Tellender, Heather Sharon, Monica Eng, and Gregory Pratt. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Weekend Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And now for the Weekend Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay dry and safe tonight, and we'll see you at 10 for Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Anyone want to weigh in on the actors' strike, the Hollywood strike? We
How
should
are they going to make shows? No writers, no actors?
No shows.
And
But
broadcasters
yes,
in Chicago, they are members of SAG-AFTRA,
as
but
Paris and I are.
yeah, but it's a different it's a different part
We're
of the
not going
union.
anywhere.
No,
As
we're
was
not.
I when I was at BZ. Yeah.
I turned on Jimmy Kimmel and I was watching it from 10 months ago. I thought it was a Christmas show.
Yeah.
I was from the year before. So what?
Well, hey, we should mention this is a perfect opportunity to tell our viewers we have new shows every single night.
There you
No
go.
reruns here on
No
WTTW.
Rah, rah, rah.
Yes.
Keep
So
your dial on 11.
keep your
That's
dial on
it.
11.
Trademark that. You should sell it to marketing.
588-1111. Wasn't that the old pledge number?
Oh, yeah. I think
You're
it
no
still
longer
is.
a journalist. You're now
Yeah.
an
That's
endorser.
like marketing.
Sorry.
Yeah. Medill is also a marketing school as well as a journalism
Integrated
school.
marketing or
What,
something?
what are you
right.
teaching at Northwestern?
Food writing.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
So I take the students to different neighborhoods.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.